Ahoy there, my children of the watch. Welcome to Star Wars Transmissions. We are breaking down Chapter 18 of The Mandalorian. Holy shiza balls. Holy kugel sacks. What an episode. With me, as always, the very lovely Danny girl. How you doing?
Good. How's it going?
Oh, I'm riding high right now.
You should be.
Not only did we get a spectacular Mandalorian episode, I feel like we probably won't have time to talk about the Bad Batch, but man, what a spectacular episode of the Bad Batch we got as well.
I know. It's really wild. Two wonderful episodes of TV tonight.
That's 2 weeks back to back that we've gotten some really great Star Wars content to dive into and consume, which is great. As a Star Wars fan, these last 2 weeks have been super, super awesome. So before we get into anything with Chapter 18, this is your spoiler warning. Get those booty cheeks out of here. Dip on out. Go watch Chapter 18 if you have yet to do so. Then come back and listen to Danny Girl and I break down episode 18, because there is a lot to discuss. I may have to skim through some of the stuff because I took a ton of notes because there was so much awesomeness in this episode. So let me start by asking you, what was your overall thoughts for Chapter 18? Did you enjoy this episode? Did you not like it?
I loved it. I have to say, shout out to my girl Bo. Happy International Women's Day. I feel like it was a great day for that.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So I absolutely love this episode. I think I liked it more than the first one. And I think this was a wild adventure. I loved seeing Grogu grow a little bit more. And we saw some Peli action here too. It was really fun all around.
I think I agree with you. I think I like this episode more so than Chapter 17. Now, don't get me wrong. I really enjoyed Chapter 17 a heck of a lot. But I think this episode was great. The exposition that we got in this episode was spectacular. The history lessons that we received in this episode was great. And you know me as someone that like nerds out on that sort of stuff. I really, really enjoyed it. So this episode was great. And then on top of that, we are left with a humongous, pun intended, reveal at the end of the episode when we see a frickin' mythosaur.
I gasped. I literally gasped and went, oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God.
I started cheering. I started like, yo! At the TV, I was going wild.
I feel like so this is what Din has been reaching toward, is bathing in the living waters of Mandalore for how long now? And he already did it, and we're only two episodes in. We have a very open rest of the season.
I love it.
So excited.
I am so glad that you mentioned that, because my assumption, and I read a lot of people assuming this, like, hey, Din's going to go on these like side quests like he has been in season 1 and 2. Maybe by like maybe the second to last episode or like the third to last episode, Din's going to make it to Mandalore. Bro, Chapter 18, second episode into the season, he's already made it to Mandalore. He's bathed in the living waters, which is wild because that leaves so much room for the story now to breathe and for where it's going to go. I have some sort of ideas, but at the same time, I'm also like, I kind of almost don't know.
But I'm really excited about those opportunities at this point. Get to meet some new characters, some new people. What the Bo-Katan seeing this mythosaur might mean or entail.
Oh boy. Oh, dude, I got my thoughts on that. So let's do this. Before we dive any further, you want to do our nice and lovely recap? What are they called?
Oh my God, I'm not ready for this.
Oh my God, I'm drawing a blank.
I'm not ready for the recap.
Don't worry, I got the
Okay.
I got you, girl. I got the recap. So let's get into it. Let's dive in. So starting us off, the episode opens. We head to Tatooine where we see our homegirl Pelly running a scam. I love this. On this poor Rodian SOB. And our boy Din soon arrives, telling her that he needs a memory circuit for IG-11. But since those are extremely hard to come by, he then has to settle for R5D4. Din, Grogu, and R5 quickly head to Mandalore, where Din tasks R5 with scouting ahead to make sure that the atmosphere is breathable. Once R5 is lost on Din's radar, Din goes to find him, but has to fight some Alamites, which actually, let me back up here for a second. Getting a little ahead of myself.
I was going to say...
Getting a little ahead of myself. Din has to fight some Alamites. Grogu and Din then travel to the Civic Center on Sundari, but Din is soon captured by this spider-like cyborg/droid, and Din and Grogu has to then travel to Kalevala and get Bo-Katan to help out. After a quick skirmish with those pesky Alamites, Bo-Katan uses the Darksaber to defeat whatever the hell that droid is and frees Din. She then tells Din she'll help him get to the living waters of Mandalore. Once at the living waters, Din prepares to bathe in the pitch black water, and dude, when we saw that water and how dark it was, I was like, bad things are coming. Before we see him pulled straight into that dark abyss. Props to Din for doing that. You could not pay me to step into that water with how dark it was. Bo-Katan quickly dives in after him and is able to save Din once again, but as they are about to resurface, we see a mother-licking frickin' mythosaur, bringing the episode to an end. Hot damn. So you guys can guess what we're going to start our conversation with. Let's start off with talking about the ending and the frickin' mythosaur.
I'm ready if you are. Oh my gosh.
So what were your thoughts seeing this mythosaur in the living waters?
Well, I believe my text was that an effing mythosaur? Like exclamation, question mark, exclamation. I'm like, that's what I think it was, but I just need to make sure because OMG. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. I was shocked. I could not believe that we got to see
a mythosaur. As soon as we see Din pull down, I was like, yo, what the heck? What's going on here? And then the moment Bo-Katan sees it, my jaw just dropped. And I was floored. We have never seen a living mythosaur in canon before. We've gotten some glimpses of like a mythosaur's skull in some comics. We see the signet that Bo-Katan talks about with Din, which we've seen on Boba Fett's armor. We've seen a bunch in other Mandalorian imagery, but we have never seen a living mythosaur or even a dead mythosaur, just a mythosaur body. We've never seen that in canon before. So to see that was just like, holy crap, man.
Well, aren't they supposed to be like rumored to have been alive like thousands of years ago?
Yes.
So I mean, it does make sense that we haven't seen one yet.
So yeah, let's do let me give you a little bit of the history of the mythosaur. So, and we kind of get a little bit of this from Bo-Katan when she's talking to Din. So, and now remember, the mythosaur was it was alluded to at the start of the episode when we were getting the recap. And I was like, yo, are we serious? Like, no way we're getting a freaking mythosaur.
Wrong.
Still, like, what the hell? So the inclusion of the mythosaur is huge because, again, like I said, this is the first time we're seeing a mythosaur in canon, and this is a big deal. This is very significant that we're seeing this creature appear in the story. To me, the inclusion of the mythosaur is more proof that what we're seeing throughout this story is all about the next person that is going to lead Mandalore. Right now, Mandalorians are fractured. A new leader needs to come and reunite them, and we've heard that throughout the series. So once Din, Bo-Katan, and Grogu get to the living waters, Bo-Katan starts reading a plaque to Din, and this is where she's giving kind of a history lesson on the mythosaur, and she's explained the plaque is, I also love a nice little touch, is written in the Mandalorian language because it's Mandalore has its own language separate from Basic. And she's explaining that the mines of Mandalore date back to the very first Mandalore. Mandalore is a term that's used to describe a leader of Mandalore. And according to Bo-Katan in that plaque, legend says that the very first leader of Mandalore tamed the mythical beast, this mythosaur, and that the living waters were its original lair of the mythosaur. And that's where we get that skull signet that represents Mandalore and the Mandalorian people. So again, as I mentioned, in Mandalorian culture, Mandalore was a title that was assumed by the sole leader of the Mandalorian people. And in canon, Mandalore the Great, which we hear Bo-Katan bring up when she's speaking to Din, he was a Mandalore that waged a series of conflicts against the Jedi Order at some point far back in galactic history. So we're talking like Old Republic or even further than that. And so this is relevant to our conversation because, as you mentioned, right, the mythosaur is this ancient creature. It was supposed to be extinct at this point. In looking up the mythosaur, I didn't realize this, but it was supposed to be extinct prior to the events of Mandalore basically becoming a scorched planet. Mandalore became this like scorched planet in what was called the Mandalorian Cataclysm. And this was like thousands of years in the past, centuries in the past. And at that point, the mythosaur was supposed to be extinct.
All right. So yeah, Bo just about lost her wig then.
Could I also tell you, at work yesterday, talking to a colleague, and they're like, what'd you think about Bo-Katan's wig? I was like, bro, that's a glow up this season with that wig, like complete improvement over last season. And she was like, 100%, I agree with you.
Absolutely. Oh, I know who it was too. Or at least
you do.
Guess.
Yes, you. I'm sure you do. So now, one thing I want to talk about, because this is why I think the inclusion of the mythosaur is such an important part of this story that we're seeing take place. And you and I talked about this recently, and I mentioned this yesterday in the Q&A, but I think at some point in this series, it's going to be revealed that the title of the Mandalorian might not actually be referring to Din. Right? The whole point of this series is to, and we're seeing this now, who is going to be the person that's going to lead Mandalore and reunite Mandalorians? I think most people are going to assume that that's Din. But what if it's not?
I'm fully on board for that. I just thought it was interesting. I had the closed captions on when I was rewatching it, and there were multiple times in this episode, and I haven't paid maybe close enough attention previously, where they referred to Din as the Mandalorian, and I was just kind of took me back, and I was like, ooh, I wonder if they're purposely doing that.
I wondered that as well, and you bring up an excellent point, because initially I was like, why are they calling him the Mandalorian? Because I saw that, of course, Danny Girl and I, us geezers, watch TV with closed captioning on.
It's the only way to do it.
And I saw that the captioning referred to Din as the Mandalorian. I'm like, what's up with that? But you and I had this conversation. I like the idea, because here's the thing. We keep hearing prophecies and songs that talk about a Mandalorian that's going to reunite the people of Mandalore and restore Mandalore. So again, I think most people would assume that that's Din, but what if it's Grogu?
So I feel like this episode, they were really laying it on thick with your son, our people. Oh, when Din said to Grogu, our people, I thought I melted. So I have to make sure that the Mandalorian, or Grogu the Mandalorian, knows or learns how to navigate. And I mean, this was just a great case in point. Mando was shown at the beginning of the episode, and Grogu got to where he needed to go get Bo-Katan to save Din's booty.
Absolutely. Avery, welcome to the chat. Your question, what is a Mandalorian, kind of relevant to what Danny Girl and I are talking about I think what we've seen in this episode, to me, hammers home what you and I discussed last weekend, what I discussed in the Q&A last night, that I think The Mandalorian, the title of this series, is referring to Grogu. So something that I wanted to include, when creating the series The Mandalorian and the character of Grogu, Jon Favreau talked about he wanted to explore a new character from Yoda's species at the beginning of their journey while in training, in contrast to Jedi Master Yoda, whose story we see end in Return of the Jedi, which I think, again, that's another point that lays credence to the idea that, hey, maybe Grogu is the one that's going to lead the people of Mandalore. The Darksaber is a perfect example. If we use the Darksaber and the symbol of the Darksaber and what that saber stands for, that saber was originally created by a Jedi Mandalorian.
Yep.
I don't know, man. The more I thought about it,
you just the more
watching this episode, I'm like, dude, I think it's going to be Grogu who we're going to see is the person that is going to be the true person that this story is actually all about. Everyone assumes it's Din. I think it might be Grogu.
I mean, I feel like, to me that makes sense. Grogu was supposed to make that choice between what did he want to be, a Mandalorian or a Jedi. Why can't he be both?
Now, here's the other thing, though.
Okay.
Whether it's going to be Din or Grogu that potentially reunites the people of Mandalore and works to restore Mandalore, Bo-Katan, I think, has other ideas. And to me, what we saw in this episode further kind of...
Oh, it's going to separate them a little bit more.
Yes. And I'm going to give you a ton of credit because you opened up my eyes to this last week. Going into when season 2 of The Mandalorian ended, I was like, yo, they are clearly setting Bo-Katan up to be the antagonist come next season. After last week, I was like, I kind of hope that she's not going to be. Maybe how we see her here, she might not be. And then you were like, bro, no way, 100% she's being set up as the antagonist. As chapter 18 starts to go on, I'm like, all right, maybe they're setting her up again to be back on Din's side. Soon as that episode ends, I'm like, yo, she's 100% going to be a rival to Din.
I think so too, and I think the poster that they released right before the beginning of the season was a huge clue to that as well. I mean, I will say I give Bo a lot of credit in this episode. I loved when Grogu rolls up with R5 in the Starfighter, and Bo saunters out and is like, I gotta get rid of this guy. I'm just so sick of him. I want to leave. He needs to leave me alone. And then as soon as she saw it was just Grogu, she knew instantly, oh my God, what happened? Like
it snapped her out of that funk. And it was right back to being the Bo-Katan that we saw at the end of the Clone Wars in season 7, and as well as in season 5, and then in Rebels. And that's why I was like, oh, maybe, just maybe we're getting I was hoping that we would get that redeemed Bo-Katan, but bro, the moment the episode as the episode is ending and it zooms in on Bo-Katan's face,
I know.
I was like, bro, that's it. That is clearly being set up as her being the antagonist. So here's my thought, right? Seeing a mythosaur, that experience is not lost on Bo-Katan. She understands the relevance of what she just encountered. According to Mandalorians, mythosaurs are extinct, and they're a big part of the lore of being a leader of Mandalore. She has felt that she is the rightful leader of Mandalore because of her bloodline, because at one point she wielded the Darksaber, and now she returns back to Mandalore and encounters this mythical ancient creature that is supposed to be extinct. You don't think in her mind she's saying, bro, that's a sign I should be the leader of Mandalore?
Oh, without without a doubt, she now has it in her mind. Even if she was making fun of Din beforehand about the creed, I also loved how you could see in her face as Din is stating the creed and he's walking into the living waters. Like, you could see the look in her face and her eyes change. Like, she kind of softened a little bit. Like, ooh, this is actually like, I may have been making fun of this, but man, I'm really feeling this. I feel like he's kind of right. He's kind of right. Like, this creed is really important to myself and my people. And then she was feeling that, and then she saw Mythosaur, and it's all over from here.
I like that you bring up the moment when Din is in the living waters, because I felt happy for Din. I was like, yo, like, again, I'm thinking it's going to be all season long, and my man's going to have to fight and claw his way to Mandalore, and he achieves it. And you could see that she says to him, hey, like, what? I don't remember exactly what she says to him, but like, are you all right, or something to that effect. And Din is just so moved. He's never been to Mandalore before. Not only is he getting to experience Mandalore, but now he's getting to experience this very important place to his people and to his culture. Think about that for Din, what that must have felt like. I really appreciated that brief moment before our boy is ripped into the abyss.
Glug glug. And I mean, we saw that last season. Like, it's so important that they try to recreate this baptism every time a new Mandalorian or a Mandalorian gets his helmet in his sect of Children of the Watch.
Yeah. So Avery, you bring up something that I want to talk about. Bo-Katan getting the Darksaber. I don't think that that's a coincidence that we see her wielding the Darksaber this episode, and we see her wielding it very, very competently, as opposed to Din, who's still like a lunkhead wielding it around. Again, I think that's think about if you're a Bo-Katan. I got to come save this schmohawk. He can't keep himself out of danger. I come from a royal bloodline. I have all this experience behind me. I shouldn't have accepted the Darksaber willy-nilly, but I've learned from that experience. And now I just saw a Mythosaur. I'm the rightful ruler of Mandalore.
I mean, she does have a clear advantage to Din, though, too, considering she did wield it before.
Absolutely. She did get to train in it. With it, I should say.
But yeah, it was definitely not lost on me, the juxtaposition between the two of them and how they wielded that Darksaber.
Right? It was like night and day compared to how each of them were wielding it. And the other thing too to think about is when you factor into the equation that in just 2 episodes, Din has accomplished what many people thought was going to take an entire season. I think it's even more likely that Bo-Katan is going to become the season's main antagonist. Where does the story go from here? I don't think we're really going to get the Empire. And I have to be honest with you, with what we've been seeing in these 2 episodes, I was maybe like halfway through this episode and I was like, dude, if we don't get another mention of the Empire this entire season, I would be 100% A-okay with that if what we're getting is the remainder of the season is what we've been seeing in these past 2 episodes. Because to me, I feel like this is so much more dope than Din versus the Empire. And especially with what we're seeing happening in the Bad Batch. Like, I'm getting enough of the Empire in the Bad Batch. I'm loving seeing these 2 episodes in this season focusing specifically on the people of Mandalore and the Mandalorians.
I agree. We've talked about how much we both love Bo-Katan previously, and if she can be, if she's the antagonist or like the co-antagonist, protagonist, or we see a lot more of her story during this season, I would love it. I mean, I know how Din kind of stole some of Boba Fett's thunder. I would be okay with Bo-Katan stealing a little bit of top billing from Din for a couple episodes.
I would be okay with that too. I really like Bo-Katan because to me, and this is why I hope I hope that we see her redeemed, because I like the idea, and this is one of the reasons why in Game of Thrones, I love Jaime Lannister's story so much. Sometimes how good and evil characters are portrayed in stories, it's very black and white. And I like when we get characters that wade in those gray waters where people do bad things all the time, and that doesn't 100% make that person an evil person, right? So I like that when we see that in stories, that people can do terrible things, but they can be redeemed. People can do good things, and they could fall to the dark side. So I say this because I like Bo-Katan. I like that when we see her, she's this terrorist for Death Watch, and then she slowly over time has redeemed herself and has learned the error of her ways, and we see her become sort of a hero by the events of Rebels. And to some extent, even in season 2 of Mando, because we're still seeing her fighting for the Mandalorian people.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I feel like there's not as many. Like, I feel like a lot of Star Wars characters are either really good or really bad. Like, it's very black and white, where I kind of like how we're getting, I feel like Bo is a little bit more gray, like you said, than a lot of characters that we've seen or focused on previously.
The other thing, too, that I'm just thinking, too, is we get a lot of this in the series is like tradition and following rules and following tenets. And is that necessarily a good thing? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. And I say this because, right, look at what we're seeing in this series so far with Mandalorians, with the Children of the Watch, how Bo-Katan, you had mentioned before how Bo-Katan is kind of like scoffing at Din's following the tenets of the Children of the Watch. Because we learned that, Bo-Katan took the creed. That is apparently, I'm assuming, I don't know if it's just like a royal thing or if it's all Mandalorians. My thought is all Mandalorians take the creed, but just most people didn't really follow it zealously.
I was going to say, my take was that everybody takes the creed, but only like the royal family got to bathe in the living waters.
That could be. I could see that. That would make sense.
Because, I mean, if there's thousands, millions of people on Mandalore, I can't imagine like all of them being able to do that.
Yeah. So I bring up like following tradition and rules and tenets of the creed, right? But what if we're seeing again, because Mandalorians throughout their history are kind of almost like the Sith in that they are constantly plagued with infighting. I love the moment when we get freaking Bo-Katan talking about her father and how her father died in the war. The war that she's referring to is the Great Clans War, which was another Mandalorian civil war fought between 41 BBY and 39 BBY. That's the war that Obi-Wan, he meets Satine and falls in love with her because Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan traveled to Mandalore. They helped protect the royal family in Satine. Obi-Wan fell in love with her. And Bo-Katan's father died during that conflict.
Thank you for the history lesson.
You're welcome.
I also loved how, oh my gosh, Bo-Katan made mention that how Mandalorians and Jedi used to get along and that she knew quite a few of them.
I enjoyed that as well. I absolutely enjoyed that. So yeah, and so I bring up the idea of like traditions and rules and stuff because what if what we're seeing, whether it's Din, whether it's Grogu, maybe it's a combination of Din, Grogu, Bo, or someone else that's going to lead Mandalore. Maybe it's not one specific Mandalorian that's going to serve as the Mandalore, the leader.
Oh.
Maybe because that's the idea that we, hey, there is value in tradition. There is value in understanding our past, but there's also value in being able to change and to adapt. Because what the Mandalorians have done previously has brought their culture and their people and their planet into ruin.
Like
I don't know if that's the case. Just something.
Maybe like a ruling council.
Could be like going back to Game of Thrones, the damn council at the end of.
Okay, I wasn't even thinking about that. Thank you not for bringing that up.
All right, so what was your thoughts about seeing Mandalorian live action?
I thought it looked pretty cool. Loved the thunder lightning. It was definitely. The music was great. It was kind of scary going through all those thunderstorms, man.
Yeah, I really enjoyed seeing Mandalorian live action. This was something I mentioned in a recent video I did, that this was like one of the things I was most looking forward to this season, is seeing Mandalorian, seeing it in live action, especially getting to see it post Night of a Thousand Tears. We got to spend a decent amount of time on Mandalore in the Clone Wars and to some extent in Rebels. So it was both great to see Mandalore in live action, but also kind of a bummer.
It really was. I mean, being able to, or seeing what everything looked like with the green glass, I guess, it was very eerie. And then when they were kind of like walking through, especially when they were walking to the living waters, seeing like all of those structures and things that are just totally decimated. And I kept thinking of, I think it was probably from the Clone Wars, with like even just looking at Satine, like walking through. I think there was one that I'm thinking of with Satine and Obi-Wan, like walking together.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's in season 2.
And just how it has changed, and how depressing, how sad that is.
I could not agree more with you. Yeah. It was very heartbreaking to see Sundari the way it is, because like you said, we know what that city looks like, or what it looked like, I should say, prior to the events of the Night of a Thousand Tears. So yeah, it was very, very heartbreaking to me. And yeah, Avery, as Avery says, Scorched Earth. Like, yeah, that is literally just a planet scorched. We heard mention of fusion bombs were used. My guess is it's probably similar to like an atomic bomb in the real world. Were used to just absolutely turn that planet, like Boba Fett says in season 2, into glass. And we literally see it. And like you said, it's, on one hand, it's like kind of baller to see these glass structures jutting out from the ground. And they kind of, my thought, like you see, it probably would be where like a bomb landed. And then you kind of see these spikes of shards of glass shooting out of the ground. Kind of dope, kind of like mesmerizing, but also heartbreaking to think that, the Empire did not give one F about what they were doing and the amount of people that they killed and the destruction that they wrought on the planet. So yeah, very heartbreaking on one hand, and then on the other, like kind of dope. Now, I also loved, you had mentioned this earlier, right? I love that Bo is talking to Grogu and she's asking him, hey, bro, like, how strong in the Force are you? And she mentions how she fought side by side with Jedi, which I loved, because we know, and she also mentioned that she had a good relationship with the Jedi, which is totally a reference to Ahsoka, to Canon and Ezra in Rebels, even Obi-Wan. She worked with Obi-Wan for some time, which I love. But to me, my thought was like, oh, that's another little nugget hinting at what's to come in the upcoming Ahsoka series.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait. Yeah, that'll be. I loved kind of Bo just interacting with Grogu and, like you said, asking him questions and just kind of like spending time with him. I also loved when those creatures, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the name, when she heard them, as soon as she heard them rustling when they were walking, she pushed Grogu away. Like, she knew that she had to protect him. I loved their little time together. I
did really like that moment when she pushed him away too. And again, that's the one thing I will say, is seeing her just kind of like snap out of it. You heard me last week when I was like, reminded me of like a divorcee coming and spending time at your parents' house, living on your sofa, just being a curmudgeon. That's how Bo-Katan seemed to me. And then she snapped out of it immediately. She's got that purpose back again. And yeah, I love that moment. Absolutely. I totally appreciated that moment where she pushes his little bassinet or whatever it's called, his little egg, hovering egg away.
His pod. Din called it his pod.
It's a good segue into what I want to talk about next.
All right.
Because I want to discuss Grogu. We already talked a little bit about Grogu, but I love that this episode did a great job of just showing just how capable Grogu is, and that Din's tutelage to Grogu is paying off.
oh my gosh, just how much he's grown. Not physically, but like in the Force and in the what he's able to handle and do.
I completely agree with you. And I of course, this was a screenshot I had to take because just him with his little hand up, this is right after he uses the Force to push that alamite, whatever they're called, away so that he could get into the N1 starfighter and get to Bo-Katan. Go ahead.
I was going to say he knew he had a mission and he was on it.
So I don't know if this is because of my love for Raised by Wolves, but I was like, yo, because Bo-Katan mentions that those Alamites have survived in the wastelands of Mandalore. I was like, yo, are those supposed to be like prior humans that have turned into these disgusting creatures because they've lived out in the wastelands of Mandalore? Again, this is like...
You might be right. I mean, they're very clearly human-esque. I mean, and I don't know if that's just because it's going to be easier for costumes and stuff, but yeah, they were very human-like.
But anyway, in the last episode, as well as in this one, Dim hammered home the point to Grogu that a Mandalorian has to be able to effectively navigate the galaxy. And we get to see that in Chapter 18. And I love that when Grogu gets into the N1 starfighter, he can't verbalize to R5 what he wants and where he wants to go. So he just points at the navigation system because he's learned in this episode and in last episode what that navigation system looks like. And Din tells him, hey, this is where Kalevala is. And he's able to use that knowledge to convey to R5 where he needs to go. So I thought that was really great. Just some other examples to show the capabilities of Grogu that we got in this episode. I love when we see him force jump into Peli's arms in the beginning of the episode.
A little show off.
All right. He uses the Force to evade a shock blast from that weird cyborg droid's electro staff. So he kind of does like a flip. We see him use the Force again to push that Alamite out of the way to be able to get back to Din's ship. So not only is Grogu's training with Luke paying off, but that knowledge that he's been getting from Din and that Din has been imparting on him is proving helpful in their travels so far as well.
It is really wild to see how much Grogu has grown in the Force from when we first met him in season 1.
It really has. And one other thing, you had mentioned this before. I love that Din was, when he's speaking to Grogu in the beginning of the episode as they're nearing Mandalore, he's saying our people, not my people, our people, and really just like going all in on being Grogu's father.
I know. Oh, they're so cute together.
One thing that I thought about during this episode is it's interesting to see how both Bo-Katan and Grogu had to confront their past to be able to move forward. Right? So what I mean by that is when we see Grogu with Luke in the Book of Boba Fett, he's not really advancing in his training until Luke has him recall the trauma of Order 66. And at that point, he starts to remember it, and then you see his training kind of like pick up with Luke a little bit.
You had to break my heart tonight, huh?
Yes. Well, I like that. I like that we're getting that connection, because here's how I think it connects. Because think about what I mentioned with Bo-Katan before, right? She's like totally dejected, sulking on her throne in this castle on Kalevala all by herself. And then here comes Grogu, letting her know that Din's in trouble, and she immediately, without hesitation, gets right into Bo-Katan, the badass, and gets right to it. But in in the same time, she has to confront and reconcile her past because she is a big part of why we see Mandalore the way it is. As I mentioned earlier, right? Mandalorians are a very fractured people. That's been their throughout their history, they've been a fractured people. And in Bo-Katan's lifetime, she's been a big part in fracturing Mandalore and its people. She was a part of Death Watch, fought against her own sister. She then helped to reclaim or tried to reclaim Mandalore from the Empire. She had to fight Mandalorian, what are they called? Mandalorian super commandos. I can't remember the exact term that they were given in Rebels. Right, so that another civil war during the Imperial era on Mandalore, which ultimately led to Mandalore being freaking scorched. So she's got to reconcile that trauma and that experience, just like Grogu has to reconcile his trauma from Order 66 to be able to move forward. And I like that.
Well, yeah, and we saw Din thinking about his past before when he was... I'm just thinking of him with the droid, when the droid killed its parents.
Yep. That's a great point. I didn't even think about that. That's an excellent point. That's absolutely a theme that we're seeing in this series so far, which is something that we saw in, Jesus Christ, the damn sequel game is just about to drop. Fallen Order. Cal had to deal with the trauma of living through Order 66 to be able to I don't want to say reconnect with the Force, but
yeah, but I think that
move
works.
forward with him becoming a Jedi. So I like that. I thought it was really cool. So we got a little bit of time left. I do want to talk about some other really cool moments in the episode. So as I mentioned, I love that this episode did a great job at providing information on Mandalore and its past. That was I feel like the exposition in this episode was spectacular, and I love just all the history dumping, the lore dumping. Maybe dumping is not the right word. I feel like Tobias Funky right now with my choice of words.
Give me the heebie-jeebies, bro.
With the lore and the history that we got in this episode, I really liked it. Bullrun, welcome to the chat, my man. Glad you're joining us. So I really like when we get the scene of Din telling Grogu that he grew up on Mandalore's moon of Concordia, which Concordia we saw in the Clone Wars. We got to see it in Rebels. Yeah, we got to see it in Rebels. That was a secret hideout of the terrorist group Death Watch, which I've mentioned a bunch. We've mentioned last week as well. Oh my God, what was the name of the group in Rebels that Fen Rao was a part of? They were also stationed on Concordia. I'm drawing a blank. Concord Dawn. Yes. Concord Dawn. We also saw Concordia in Rebels with Concord Dawn. So I thought that was really cool. Right, as I mentioned earlier, we're introduced to these Alamites.
They're so ugly.
Oh, so ugly, dude. And again, to Danielle's dismay, I freaking love Raised by Wolves. And one of the things, I don't want to spoil it because if anyone has any interest in watching Raised by Wolves, it's so damn good. I don't want to spoil it. But because of being a fan of Raised by Wolves, it made me think, yo, are these prior Mandalorians that devolved into these beings from living in the wastelands of Mandalore? But anyway, violence, man. Holy crap. When Din is fighting these Alamites and just stabbing this one and then throwing him off that ledge, whatever they're standing on, damn.
There's lots of Pedro Pascal leg action this past week.
I like that word, leg action. Judo chopping legs. I did enjoy that as well. We get our homegirl Bo-Katan explaining to Din, as you and I talked about earlier, she had to swear the oath of the Creed, which Bo-Katan referred to as the Mandalorian tenets, which again, my thought is everyone in Mandalore, that's something that they had to do. But for her royal family, That was just for ceremonial purposes, and our homegirl was given a bunch of gifts afterwards. And as I mentioned earlier, when Bo-Katan is talking about her father to Din, she explains that her father Din died during the war. And again, that war is the Great Clan Wars. And again, that took place in 41 BBY to 39 BBY. So roughly 40 years before the events of the New Hope. So that war would have been about almost 50 years prior to the events of what we're seeing happening in The Mandalorian. So I thought that was really cool. I also really appreciated that Din was like, your father sounds like a great man. I would have liked to have met him. And then when she says, yes, he was a great man, he died, whatever, Din says to her, this is the way. And I felt like Bo-Katan appreciated that. So again, to your point earlier, where she seems to be, she would scoff at Din at certain at certain points throughout the episode, but I also felt that at certain points, she was appreciating Din and his ways, so to speak.
Yeah, I agree. I think she was definitely warming up to Din throughout the episode, especially at the end, which we already talked about. Yeah, she's maybe realizing this is the way.
I don't know. I also thought it was interesting too how, like, you know, again, they're kind of both getting in each other's buns about what it means to be a Mandalorian, what a true Mandalorian does. And after Bo-Katan saves Din from that droid / cyborg, whatever it is, she gives him the pog soup, and he's like, what the hell is pog soup? And she's like, bro, every Mandalorian worth their salt grows up on pog soup. So it's interesting to see that they both have their different perspectives, and neither one is necessarily wrong.
But what is pog soup?
I don't know. I think that's the first we've ever heard pog soup, as far as I know.
I was just curious. It looked like some kind of powdered stuff she tossed in a cup.
So to go back to what I mentioned earlier about Din telling Bo-Katan, hey, this is the way, when they're talking about her father, did you think that Grogu was nodding at her as well? Like, he can't verbalize this is the way, but him nodding was his way of telling Bo-Katan, yes, this is the way. My thought was, hey, we keep seeing Grogu soaking up all this information from Din. Why wouldn't he be trying to acknowledge Bo-Katan's father there? And then Bo-Katan makes the comment to Grogu, like, what are you looking at?
I know. I was like, why are you picking on little Grogu?
But yeah, I really like that. I don't know if that's the case, but my thought is Grogu is just soaking up all this information from Din like a sponge, and that was his way of trying to communicate to Bo-Katan, this is the way, bro. Big ups to your pops. All right, let's talk about that damn droid. I want to talk about this.
Was creepy.
Dude, I think that's a freaking cyborg. I don't think that's a droid.
I got General Grievous vibes.
Yes, I think that's a good comparison. I think that is supposed to be a cyborg. The fact that it has an eye.
Yeah.
And it's like straight up feeding on Din. And we see Mandalorian helmets strewn throughout its lair. So the implication is homeboy's got to like turn Mandalorians into soup for him to, he's got to consume organics to be able to survive. That is not a droid. Most droids in Star Wars are made to not look like, they're kind of made to resemble humans, but not straight up look like humans. And not that this droid does, but the fact that it has an eye that looks very much like an organic being's eye, I think it's supposed to be that, hey, this is potentially a former Mandalorian.
I didn't even think of that. Oh, so I guess, and here's my other thing, like if that was you just blew my mind. If that was a former Mandalorian and we have all of these helmets strewn about, I guess my thought is, how many Mandalorians have been trying to go back to Mandalore?
I wondered that as well. And that I don't know. But we could assume there's been some. We know Boba Fett. Did Boba Fett go to Mandalore? No, because Boba Fett tells Din that Mandalore's been turned to glass. So I don't know. I think that that's a cyborg. I really do. And yeah, I got, so Bull Run mentions, or excuse me, Yoan mentions that it kind of looks like a spider assassin droid in Clone Wars. Yeah, I like that thing. Totally reminded me of the Sentinels from the Matrix when we see it in its like spider form. Let me go back. So I totally got like, I'm going to talk about this. I found, to me, several references that I thought were paying homage to the Matrix in this episode.
Oh, that sounds fun.
Yeah, and this to me, this droid was, it felt very similar to the Sentinels and how they look in the Matrix. I also love too that when you see it in like its spider form, you can kind of see in the background all the chains that were all around its lair that I felt like, oh, that's supposed to be like spider webs, but they're chains.
I also loved how it could like, was it that small part that the piece that could crawl between?
Dude, how dope is that?
I know. Like, oh, I'm going to go to my spider body now. Ooh, I'm going to go to my walking creepy body now. Big ups to whoever designed this. I thought that this was really great. It was a great, I love the music too when we see, dude, it totally reminded me of music from Annihilation. Oh my God, who's the director of Annihilation? I'm drawing a blank on their name. Fantastic film. And the music that we see during the scenes with this droid, the action scenes involving the droid, very similar to music from Annihilation. So again, I wouldn't shock me if they're pulling from some other sci-fi in when they creating this episode. But yeah, the design of this droid just oozed creepiness and danger to me. So, as I mentioned, let me talk to you about some of the other little nods I felt to the Matrix. So again, this droid / cyborg felt very reminiscent of the Sentinels in Matrix. The robots in the Matrix are using humans as a power supply. What do we see this frickin' cyborg droid doing? Sucking Din's blood to turn into a soup, right? Additionally, when we see Din and later Bo-Katan descend into Mandalore's atmosphere, they're initially met with like turbulent storms before they get underneath them and find a quiet and tranquil planet. Now, in the Matrix, the surface of Earth is completely desolate, just like Mandalore. Rocked, but the difference is it's rocked with storms on the surface, but once Neo travels above those storm clouds, he sees nothing but a beautiful sky. So I could be pulling things out of my buns hole here, but to me, I felt like these were definite homages to the Matrix. And again, I could be pulling things out of my butt, but that was a couple of things that I thought that were pretty cool. As much as I love this episode, oh boy,
I did have one knock on it. R5.
What happened to him at the end? Where'd he go? Are we sad that he's in it, I'm assuming?
Well, as much, and maybe a knock on this episode isn't the best thing to say, because to me it's almost like a knock on the previous episode. Such a driving force last episode was Din getting IG-11 so that he can go to Mandalore. And he now, chapter 18, he arrives at Tatooine. Pelly, I need a memory chip. Memory circuit. Oh, those aren't made anymore. Okay, I'll take R5. Like, not even, like, without hesitation. There is no argument. And it's so easy for Pelly to convince Din to take, to buy R5.
That's very true, considering how hard Grief was like, had to push or try to get, I know.
Grief is telling him buy a new droid. Think about, I mean, as amazing as the Anzellan scene was when he's speaking to the droid smiths, think about everything Din is going through just to get a memory circuit, and then Pelly turns him in an instant.
Pelly, I feel like that just proves what a
she's a masterful salesperson.
Took the words right out of my mouth. Exactly, and I love how when she's like putting him in the ship to leave, and she's like, "Oh yeah, he's such a like a worry wart or whatever she said," and he's like, "Wait, what? No, I thought he was adventurous." And she's like, "Bye."
So yeah, listen, this is like a very minor gripe on my end, but I will say, like, a little weird that our homeboy was able to flip so easily. But again, to Pelly's credit, she is a superior salesman. She's a grifter, that girl.
Gosh,
she's a grifter.
She absolutely is. I love it.
Can I ask you a question?
Oh, boy.
Did you see the speeders in the beginning of the episode when we first roll into Tatooine and you see the... Did you think that they were riot racing?
I mean, I thought it was some kind of racing. That could be riot racing. Would they have... I mean, they wouldn't be pod racing.
Definitely not pod racing. I wondered if that was... I was like, could this be... Is it just two speeders just roaming, like, racing through the streets of Tatooine? What is it? No, they're not. They're on Mos Eisley. Yeah, they're in Mos Eisley. But then I was like, bro, we just saw riot racing in the Bad Batch. Dave Filoni created the Bad Batch. He's a part of the Mandalorian. What if that's like, hey, and Boonta Eve, on top of pod racing, we get riot racing in the streets of Mos Eisley? That'd be freaking cool.
We're gonna believe it was riot racing. I'll buy into it.
I really like that. I really like that. I also, the poor Rodian just getting straight grifted by Pelly.
I know, and he really had no other option. She did him dirty. Her and those damn Jawas.
They got a racket, those two. They got a freaking racket.
I mean, she did used to date one.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, she does say.
Furry under there.
So Bullrun says, my gripe for this episode is it was short again, but just that I want more. It's so cool. So part of me wants like hour-long episodes, and then part of me as a YouTuber is like, oh, please let them be like 30 minutes. It's because it takes so much time to write stuff, to get questions, to take notes with my work schedule that sometimes I'm like, just give me a 30-minute episode. It'll be easier on my life. But at the same, as a Star Wars fan, I want an hour-long episode, an hour-and-a-half long episode. I never want them to end.
I feel like an hour is a great length. Gives you enough, leaves you wanting more.
How long was this episode? Was it like 45 minutes? 50 minutes? I don't even remember.
It was officially like 42.
Oh, okay.
42 or 45, one of the two.
However long it was, this was a spectacular episode. I wish we could talk about the Bad Batch as well, because man, the Bad Batch was great. What I will say, we got just a few more minutes. What I do want to say about the Bad Batch is my boy Crosshair and Mayday. Jesus Christ, dude. Like, my heart sunk for those two at the end of that episode.
That was rough. That was a really rough episode. And I say that with like the most love. Like, I thought it was a wonderful episode that was extremely well done. But man, to show just how hateful and callous the Empire was really heartbreaking.
It really made me sad. Like, I did not cry, but I was like kind of getting emotional at the end of that episode. Like, dude, our homeboy, and I probably should have said spoiler warning. Spoiler warning for the Bad Batch. Our poor boy Mayday. And just seeing how grief-stricken Crosshair is, that Jesus Christ, I don't remember the lieutenant's name, how callous you are. Nolan, thank you. We are literally hiking through the most desolate of winter, like ice storms, to be able to just potentially have the chance to live. And all you care about is some damn armor. And he calls Crosshair a freaking clone.
Nolan was a jerk. He was awful. I
think I said this to you at the end when I asked you, what do you think's going on with Crosshair? I think he's being turned into a death trooper.
I want him to get back with his family.
I don't think it's happening. I want it to. I think he's being turned into a death trooper. So the death trooper, I made a video about this like a year and a half ago. Death troopers had like a bunch of experiments done on them, confidential experiments done on them to turn them into these super freaking deadly troopers. And here's our boy Crosshair at Mount Tannis with the like cloning division. What is it? The research division, whatever that division is that Hemlock and Pershing are a part of. I think he's being turned into a death trooper, bro.
Oh my gosh, that's really sad.
But that's about our time.
On that depressing note.
On that depressing
God.
note. So, another spectacular episode of The Bad Batch. Another spectacular episode of The Mandalorian. I don't know what the rest of season 3 has in store for us, but I think we're in for a wild ride. Apparently, was it Dave Filoni or Favreau that was like, fans are going to be very pleased with some of the reveals that we're going to be getting this season, and we're only in episode 2 and we got a freaking mythosaur, but yeah.
Whew, that was all kinds of fun.
Now's a good time, you knuckleheads. If you have not, like this video, subscribe to Star Wars Transmissions, follow us on TikTok at SW Transmissions. We're going to be breaking down The Mandalorian. Oh my God, when I was close to finishing up stuff for our live stream today, I started working on a video that I'm hopefully going to release this weekend about what we've seen in The Mandalorian. So videos dropping, shorts dropping on the reg. We got the weekly Q&A. A lot of good stuff coming from Star Wars Transmission. So make sure that you guys subscribe and let me know down in the comments. What did you think of Chapter 18? Did you like Chapter 18? Did you dislike Chapter 18? What'd you think of The Bad Batch? I wish we could freaking spend more time talking about The Bad Batch. But with that said, I gotta make my dang lunch for tomorrow. And my cat's trying to jump on my lap. She's got the worst timing. She always jumps on our laps right as we're like about to get up or as we're about to leave or without fail. She does it all the time, and she just jumped on my lap.
Impeccable timing. She's got a sixth sense.
She really does. But with that said, my friends, thanks for watching. May the Force be with you, and stay nerdy.